Good evening. I am happy to be here this evening to introduce some remarkable people who I photographed and to think about the projects that they're exploring today. I am Professor Deb Willis. I am Chair of Photography and Imaging at the Tisch School of the Arts. I'm also a photographer, and I write about photography. So it's my pleasure to welcome everyone here today. This project is entitled Point of Triangulation, Intersections of Identity. And it's about questioning and re-examining this whole aspect of identity through the photograph, through dress, through the experience of stereotyping. And this is a project that was conceived by Michelle Daniel Jones, and I'm really excited to introduce everyone here. Michelle Daniel Jones is a fourth year doctoral student in the American Studies program at New York University in the Department of Social and Cultural Analysis. She's interested in excavating the collateral consequences of criminal convictions for people and families directly impacted by mass incarceration. In addition to participating in scholarly projects challenging the narratives of the history of women's prison with a group of incarcerated scholars. While incarcerated, Michelle published and presented her research findings to dispel myths and notions about the intellectual capacity of justice-involved women. Michelle's advocacy extends beyond the classroom through collaborations and opportunities to speak truth to power. She's a board member of Constructing Our Future, a re-entry program created by incarcerated women in Indiana in 2017 and 18, Beyond the Bars Fellow. In 2017-18, she was a research fellow at the Charles Warren Center for American Studies at Harvard University. 2018 and 19, she was a Ford Foundation Bearing Witness Fellow with Art for Justice. In 2019, Right of Return Fellow with SOZI. And in 2019 and 20, here we're involved with the Mural Arts Rendering Justice Fellow. Michelle is currently under contract with the New Press to publish a history of Indiana's carceral institutions for women with fellow incarcerated and formerly incarcerated scholars. As an artist, Michelle is interested in finding ways to funnel her research pursuits into theater and dance. Michelle found a liturgical dance ministry in prison 19 years ago called Lifted. This is still in existence today. Her original co-authored play, The Duchess of Stringtown, was produced in December 2017 in Indianapolis as well as in New York. So we have Michelle here. She is going to introduce the project, as well as we have a number of questions. I'm going to moderate this experience. But we also have three other participants in the project, and it's exciting for me to introduce Abd'Allah Lateef. I'm going to read a quote, was disappeared from society as a 17-year-old child. He spent 31 years in prison before being released in the fall of 2017. Abd'Allah is currently a senior strategist and racial equality specialist with the Campaign for the Fair Sentencing of Youth headquartered in Washington, D.C. We also have John Thompson, is a returning citizen, Executive Director of New Hope Services, which is in North Philadelphia, and a community organizer. And we also have Reverend Dr. Michelle Ann Simmons, is the founder and currently serves as Chief Executive Officer of Why Not Prosper, which provides housing and program for formerly incarcerated women in Philadelphia. Her mission is to help women from prison systems discover their own strength by providing them with the support and resources that will empower them to become responsible, economically self-sufficient, and contributing members of the community. It's really exciting and important for us to have this discussion, to think about how images are presented and how we all are viewed through within and on outside of our communities. So welcome, Michelle.
Thank you so much for that introduction, and I'm really excited to have you, Professor Willis, and then three of the actual participants in the project. Point of Triangulation really came out of being in the work of, in the research that came out of being in Professor Willis's class. The class was called Black Body and the Lens, and we were examining, in particular, what Frederick Douglass thought about photography and the use of photography in changing narratives of how the formerly enslaved were viewed and how soldiers fighting in the Civil War, Black soldiers, were viewed in that time. And as a part of looking at, first of all, I didn't know that Frederick Douglass was that interested in photography, but he was really fascinated about the ability of photography to change how people were viewed and the ability of photography to create new narratives. And I thought, well, could that work for formerly incarcerated people? Does photography have that power to work for us in that same way? And so I offered a project proposal to Professor Willis as my final project for that class. And that led me to actually apply for a Soze Foundation grant to present that, to actually put that idea, that research question to work in the project. And that led to being able to make that same or similar project proposal to Mural Arts. And so this project is all about, though every single participant in this project are beautiful, wonderful human beings, the project is aimed towards the observer, the person who will look at a formerly incarcerated person once they know they're formerly incarcerated, and then stigmatize them or actually weaponize stigma against them, right? And so the point of triangulation is to set up that space of knowing someone's formerly incarcerated and then seeing them as they are in the world, and having the observer then to check within themselves the way in which they might stigmatize this person on the right once they know, and the power of knowledge, and how knowledge is weaponized against formerly incarcerated people, and people, period, who come involved with the criminal justice system. That's the heart behind it. And then it's also driven by this idea that we need to tell other stories about people who become involved with the criminal justice system. They're not a single story. And that was, I was also inspired by one of the pieces that Professor Willis presented, which was from Chimamanda, and she asked us to think really seriously about this idea that we are more than a single story, and we are. And so this mural project allowed us to take these ideas of the stained glass window, which is a single piece of stained glass is just a thing on its own, but once pieced together, it's a whole person, right? So I look at criminality like that. Criminality is just one aspect, or being involved in the criminal justice system is one of our experiences. It's not the whole totality of who we are. And we need to be mindful of that. And it's to challenge the observer to confront that when they see these beautiful people, these beautiful Philadelphians, these beautiful activists and artists and writers and scholars, to have them confront that in a very visual medium of photography. That's the heart behind the project.
And the exhibition is now on display and also online at the African American Museum in Philadelphia, rendering justice. And I'm gonna just move away from my chair a second, just so you can imagine what the installation looks like. So here we see a part of the installation of the exhibition.
Right, and so that's John Dye. John Dye is dressed in carceral clothing on one side, but also in his choice of clothing that makes him that reemphasizes who he feels he is himself. And they're juxtaposed and they're life size. And you can't see, there's a red line on the ground because we want the observer to step into the intimacy of the triangle, to look at John Dye on the one side and on the other side and examine the stigma that they would ascribe to him while he's dressed in carceral clothing, that they would not once they see them dressed in his favorite suit.
Great, thank you. I want to invite Abd'Allah Lateef to talk about why you agreed to be a part of this project.
So thank you, Dr. Willis. And in many ways, you could say the short of it is because when Michelle put forth the invitation, you respond. And that indeed is the short of it, because her work and her passion that she brings to her work to lift up the stories, voices, and experiences of hyper-marginalized people is inspiring in and of itself. And so I could not but accept the invitation with grace, honor, and enthusiasm, as it were. And so as for why I think ultimately I decided to be a part of this project, is because something that I find in the title of a docuseries by Ava DuVernay, When They See Us.
Mm.
And when they see us, they see the totality of who we are as individuals. And as Michelle mentioned about the weaponization, as it were, of stigma, stereotype, indeed the weaponization of Blackness through the concept of criminality, is something that I'm very intimate and familiar with, being the recipient of all of the disadvantage that comes from those stereotypical appellations that have been placed on me and many of my peers and community. And so when this opportunity came about, the created opportunity to see me in my wholeness, and to restore some of that which has been unjustly taken from me, then I could not but respond. And I'll pause with just stating, for those who don't know or don't understand the significance of the juxtaposition between prison garb and being able to clothe ourselves with the clothing of our choice. Prison, by its very nature, is meant to strip away many things, not just freedom, but it also strips away self-identity, it strips away dignity, it strips away the freedom of expression. And so what this project does, in effect, is help to restore those things from which we have been stripped of. And that is the primary reason for why I agreed to participate in this project.
Yes, thank you. We have a break in a second. I'd like to just show some of the photographs, because the opportunity to photograph all of you is just an inspiring experience for me, based on dress and what we have in our closets and how identity is formed through our sense of self. So thank you. John Thompson, as a returning citizen, how do you see yourself in this project, and why did you say yes?
First, hello to everyone. Well, I see myself in this project as being a person who can lend credence to those two sides, the different parts that you have from being incarcerated to being in society. And it was a wonderful opportunity when it was presented to me, because just let me give you an example. If you see me on the street a lot of times when I'm just working, doing my field work, doing organizing activism, I wear my hat like this. And I wear my hat like this for a reason. One of the reasons why I wear my hat like this is because people get a preconceived notion of who I am just based on my hat, the way it is. But then once they talk to me and find out about me, it gives them a whole different perspective. And they ask me, why do you wear your hat like that? Well, I wear my hat like this because, for one, when you have a bald head, it gets cold. That's for one. And I don't like this beak to be in the front of my eye, my peripheral vision. And that's why I wear it like that. So I get an opportunity to dispel those myths, because a person wears his hat in a certain manner, he's a certain type of a person. Well, that's the same with the project. It gave me an opportunity to show that, yes, I was in prison. I did 37 years in prison. Now I'm in society, and not only am I a law-abiding citizen in society, but I'm one of the leaders in my community. So it was a great opportunity. I wouldn't have passed this up for the world. And hopefully that we can do some more things like this. I just love it.
Great. Thank you. And Reverend Michelle, it was wonderful photographing you
Oh,
and to feel your spirit through the entire session. And again, the same question, the opportunity to express yourself through dress and through the experience that you've had in the studio, transformed me and warmed my heart. But how did you feel about being participating in this project?
first of all, thank you for inviting me and all my co-panelists. God bless y'all. And I just want to, and Michelle, thank you for saying yes to the vision. You too, Dr. Willis, because sometimes God give us assignments and they go right over our heads. So thank you for the yes. What I want to say is my yes was about in this project was just to be a demonstration of the change. Sometimes when we're labeled formerly incarcerated or convicted people, that's where it stops at. And this project gave us and gave me an opportunity to reframe, right? And to just show society that that's not the end of the story,
Right.
Through art. And that was the reason why I wanted to be a part of it, because I am not my experiences, all right? I am not what I went through. And I don't even actually know when I crossed over that line, to be honest, but I'm super excited about who I am. And to be able to be part of this exhibit and this program gave me the opportunity to show that and to be a beacon of hope to women and sisters coming behind me that they too could change.
Thank you. Michelle, this was also oral history project, not just a visual experience. In terms of the questions that you addressed, you want to explore some of them and
Yeah,
on that?
yeah, absolutely. I kind of wanted, I asked a lot of opening questions because I wanted to kind of first capture if the individual experienced stigma, however they defined it, while incarcerated, prior to incarceration, while incarceration, and what's home, and what that looked like for them, and how did they overcome it. I asked questions that were really geared toward introspection of how they got through it, because and through that, I interviewed everybody in different periods, right? And obviously they haven't been privy of the interview of the other interviewees' words, but overwhelmingly there was this red thread that came through of resilience.
Mm-hmm.
That prior to incarceration, all of the participants they had certain challenges. Those increased in incarceration, and then they also had a significant amount that followed them afterward. But their work, their families, their focus, their advocacy, in spite of all that, it was really powerful to see that resilience is what kind of rang really strong from all 9 of the participants in the project. That there was some inner wellspring, a reservoir of spirit strength, personal knowledge of themselves that they were able to tap into, that allowed them to get through onto the other side. And it was so clear that, and they're all from different walks of life, that was a red thread. And so I asked questions that were geared towards getting to that. And I actually found myself challenged a little bit because I really wanted people to really go heavy in on, what the system did to them, but I often got like more responses about like how they responded to what happened to them. And it was just very fruitful, couple hour interviews with everybody. And I wanted to figure out how to get that into the mural. Obviously in the exhibit itself, there's QR codes that a person can use their phone and scan, and then hear a selection of their interview, 3 to 4 minutes of their interview, and they can hear it while they look at this person and they stand on the red line. And so they have this physical you know, they have this physical experience, they have this textual experience of holding a phone and listening, and this auditorial and this vision that they're using their whole body in the exhibit. But how do you do that in a mural? And I ended up choosing one word that like spoke to what it meant to be always resilient, and one word from each interview that spoke about what it meant to be once stigmatized. And that became the word that kind of flows in the mural with their photo. And it's a way of what you're trying to combine a lot of.
I think you froze. I'm going to move for another question because Michelle is frozen. But Abd'Allah, just in terms of your encounter with photography, what, you know, how do you feel about photography, and what do you do today to counteract and fight against inequalities? Michelle, you froze for a while.
So I saw that. I'm just back. I have no idea what I last said that you heard.
Yeah. So we're now, I'm just going to ask the question about this encounter with photography. We know how photography forms an image, and you brought up Ava DuVernay's film, but with your encounter with photography, when did it begin, and how do you experience photography, and what do you do today to fight against inequalities?
Mm. Yeah, thank you for that question, or those questions, and there's a lot there. And to digress just a small smidget before getting to the essence of the question and my response there too. My experience with photography is one of understanding the power of photography and the power of imagery. And I think I learned that most intimately in the way that former life sentence children across this country were depicted as super predators. And the mugshots and the imagery often left that impression.
Yeah.
Where we weren't able to be saw or seen or perceived as human beings, but as the predators that we were being depicted as. And so I understood the power of that imagery, and certainly the imagery wasn't a true representation of the person, but it could be manipulated in a way where you take a photo, a mugshot of a person in their worst moment, and add to that a caption. The power of the image will allow our imagination to assume the worst of that person.
Sorry.
And so I understood that early on through my incarceration, but also I understood at a time when being incarcerated within the Department of Corrections here in Pennsylvania, there was a time when incarcerated persons could wear street clothes. And there was a deliberate policy to strip that away. And it served a twofold purpose. One was so that individuals could be deprived of individuality and a sense of self. But it also had the deliberate or unintentional consequence of fortifying this idea of us against them. And this is in reference to correctional officers. And so it helped for officers to be in uniform and the enemy combatant being represented in the prison population. And they were all the same. You look at them all the same way, that they are rapists, murderers, cutthroat killers. And that image was reinforced through clothing. And so I did understand the power of those dynamics. And so how I grapple with that and survive that with reclaiming my dignity, identity, and sense of purpose and self-efficacy was a process that some others were unable to complete. And it's important to also, while we talk about resilience, to also realize that there are other people, some of whom took their own lives and did not manage to survive the carnage that is incarceration. And so we need to name that as well. And because of that, and having intimate knowledge and relationships that ended in that way, my work is dedicated to ensuring that the whole of society see the totality of us, the real us, the essence of who we are, not as former convicted folks or people who are incarcerated, but see who we are and the essence of who we are as complicated human beings, and the full beauty and the scope of empathy, compassion, concern, and all of those beautiful attributes that we celebrate as human beings, but also realizing that we're not infallible, that we make mistakes and that we're capable of rectification, we're capable and worthy of redemption. And imagery helps to fortify that concept and that understanding when you can see the totality of my humanity and not the one mistake that are several mistakes that I made along the way.
Yeah, thank you. Michelle, do you want to go back to your oral history description?
Yeah, I don't know quite where I left off before I froze up. But really briefly, I felt like it was important to ask questions to give people the opportunity to explain or share what they wanted to do with their own experience in their own words, in their own way, and just offered some guiding questions in order to kind of get at the heart of what it meant to be stigmatized and what it meant to deal with it in real time. And people gave a lot of anecdotes and a lot of personal stories about how they overcame or how they were currently in some mess and they were struggling against those forces in the community. And also for a few people in their own personal lives, in their own way, in their own thinking, to overcome. And it just shows you, like Abd'Allah said, the complexity of the human experience. And that's why it's such a false idea to relegate someone who's been involved with the criminal legal system as only that, as only a criminal. It's such a false thing, because we are far more than that. There's far more complexity and textures to who we are as people, and giving an opportunity for the observer, the outside person, to confront some of that stigma that they create and some of those ideas that they hold. I believe photography has a role to play in allowing that confrontation to happen.
That's great. There's someone talking in the back of one.
Yes, it's my husband. He's on a Zoom in another room, so I'm going to put on headphones.
Door. Okay.
Yeah, it's closed.
Okay. Okay. Dr. Reverend Michelle, can you also talk about the experience of the photograph and your experience just in terms of encouraging, the idea of how the power of the image, but then also what happens with that power when you creatively change. I thought what Abd'Allah mentioned, the power of that experience that some of us never really think about in that way. So just curious about that. And then I'm going to ask John the same question.
For me, if I hear you correctly, the picture, the imagery, the posing, what stood out for me in that process, and you helped me get there. You was like, show me a pose of strength. Show me a pose of what it looked like to be, strong. And so, I'm not an artist and I don't do a lot of pictures, so this was like a new experience for me. And so And I need to say, I didn't see the finished product yet. But what I took away from it was on that day of doing the project, from switching from the jail clothes, right, to my dress, I felt like I had came a long way. And the picture and the photography got to express that. It got to show that, Dad, you in the dress now, because me, a little bit like Mr. Thompson, you know, I like sweatpants and sneakers. And so now I'm a CEO and I have to wear dresses, or I choose to wear dresses. You know, it gets to show who I am. The photography gets to show that growth, that development, and that resilience we talked about. So for me, the imagery part was inside for me. It was an inside part that made me smile. And hopefully the viewer viewing the photos will be able to see the change in us as well.
Great, thank you.
I love that. Really quickly, I love that you said that you talked about the transition from the carceral clothing to your own clothing was important. We made an intention very early on with this project that no one would leave. Like the final photos that we would do would never ever be in the carceral clothing. Like regardless of logistics, we're going to start there and we're going to end with them in whatever clothing of empowerment or whatever they like or comfort that they like at the end, so that even though we have to take you back there in your consciousness for a brief moment, was very much an intention not to leave you there. So I think that's beautiful that you had an experience when you changed, because that's exactly what we wanted to make sure happened by making sure that one photo shoot happened first and the next one followed.
John?
It's funny that the Reverend would say that, because I had that same feeling. I wanted to get out of those clothes, those prison, the clothes that I was using to depict my prison state so fast. I wanted to get out of those clothes. I wanted to get out of those clothes and back into my regular attire, because I don't know, it's a connection there with the clothes, like Brother Lateef said. It's a connection there with the clothes, being incarcerated. You understand, like he said, when they took away our street clothes, it was for a purpose. Now we all had on the same color. We became the enemy. So during my time of taking that photo, even though I had on gray sweatpants, which are the sweatpants that they issue in prison, I wanted to get out of that so bad and get back into my other clothes, because I don't know, I just didn't want that feeling. I just didn't want that feeling on my body for me. And I went through the procedures and they helped me with the photos, show me this position, show me this, show me that. That helped me a lot, because I don't take a lot of photographs. I don't, you know, I'm not very photogenic, as they say. However, I gave it my best shot, and it was a very unique experience.
You from saying you're not photogenic. You see my photographs? Excuse me? Okay.
Yes. Well, I'm saying personally, I'm not saying the photographer. I'm saying me personally. Like sometimes my facial expressions don't fit the moment.
Okay, I'm gonna show you some photographs and you'll see what I mean.
Mad. They see me as being mad or angry, and I'm like, no, that's just the face God gave me. There's nothing I can do about that. Like, you know, and but the overall experience taking those photos, like the Reverend said, I wanted to get out of my prison garb and back into my regular street clothes. That was for me. It made me feel something.
So that experience also brought back memory.
Right, it did.
That as Abd'Allah mentioned, not only the sense of the personal trauma of, you know, when we talk about resilience, so there's also loss. So that's something that you experience in changing. And Michelle, talk about that in terms of why you requested people to bring in, you know, those two sets of clothes. Did you understand that could be a traumatic experience?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I had a chance to talk to Sherelle Rowland, who is an artist who created the Jumpsuit Project, and he uses the jail orange jumpsuit as a way in which to engage communities to discuss mass incarceration. And I asked him, as a part of another project, what he felt about like wearing those suits. And there's a certain, I know because I've actually worn those suits as well, there's a certain, I didn't choose the right word, but there's a certain harm done by asking people to kind of live in that space. And so I had to be conscious of like, not what type of clothing.
Mm-hmm.
I'd made a choice very early on not to offer the orange jumpsuit or the red or the yellow jumpsuit. Mm-hmm. And I said, well, how can I get at that kind of carceral experience in order to set up the juxtaposition? And I chose the white t-shirt, the gray sweats and white tennis shoes, only because that's a common outfit that's worn inside universally across the country. But it's also typically worn in the auspices of rec or leisure or lounge clothing. It is not your uniform that you wear to go to work or education or programs. And so I thought that of all the violences, all the harm of going back to carceral clothing, that this was the least harmful. That's why we also made the point, as I said earlier, to ensure that people did not walk out of the building in carceral clothing and did not come dressed in carceral clothing, right? Because we don't want to reinforce that. It's a moment in time that we're trying to capture, but we don't want to keep anybody there. And it was very intentional about that. We were very intentional.
So we know about your projects that you're working on and your next project with your dissertation, and you're about to present your proposal. I was curious about if you want to talk about your next project, and then I'm going to ask everyone else what you're working on now before I show some photographs that.
Sure. So I'm working on my dissertation proposal, which is I've been inspired by this group of cohort as well as the New York cohort, but I've been very inspired by this particular group of people to think about the creative liberation strategies that incarcerated and formerly incarcerated people deploy in order to, particularly incarcerated people deploy in order to survive incarceration. So this idea of resilience kind of took me on a deep dive to investigate that in a real way. And so my dissertation project is going to focus in on that and investigate the way that people create undercommons and create communities of safety and sharing and caring for one another under oppression, in a carceral regime. I'm interested in that in a deep way, but that project is a dissertation project. But right now, I'm part of a group who is looking at how we can turn the Mourning Our Losses website into a traveling exhibit, artist exhibit. So Mourning Our Losses is a website that was created to honor the life and legacy of incarcerated and formerly incarcerated people who died as a result of COVID-19. This mural, this project has a massive website. You can take a look at it. You guys can check it out on Mourning Our Losses. And they've made a decision that they want to create something that can be engaged with communities around the country. And I get to be a thought partner and an artist on creating that idea that'll travel around, and I'm very excited about it.
Great, thank you. John, what are you working on now?
Currently, I'm working on a number of things. One of the biggest things that I'm working on is a formerly incarcerated union for organization for formerly incarcerated people who have family members incarcerated. And what we're primarily trying to do is get everybody on the same page dealing with mass incarceration and criminal justice reform. And my way of doing that is to organize them into a block of people that we can have 10, 20,000 people who can push this issue forward, because we need real criminal justice reform in this country. And if I can do my little part right here in Philadelphia, hopefully it will expand. Mm-hmm. So that's one of the things that I've been working on. I've also been working on some things in the community, in my old community where I lived at, around the Nicetown, Huntington Park area. It's very violent down there. So they like second on the list of violence, shootings and stuff. So what I want to do is I'm down there trying to talk to some of the young guys, doing some violence prevention, just some, you know, making connections with some of the younger guys, because they don't know who I am. They don't know who I am. They just know it's this guy that comes on the corner and talk to us. You know, that's what they know. But when I tell them I know their fathers, their uncles, their cousin, their grandfathers, then they, you know, they listen a little bit more attentively. So that's really a passion of mine, is this violence. And I want to continue to teach this violence prevention and trying to get these guys to just put these guns down.
Great, great. Abd'Allah.
Yeah, so currently, like John, there's a multitude of things that we're trying to work on, but one that is timely to this discussion, we're approaching the anniversary of the super predator narrative. Its 25th year anniversary, when it was introduced into mainstream media on November 27th, 25 years ago, 1995. And so as an organization, we're past the issue of trying to debunk that myth, but looking at what it means to bring about accountability in the social or the media space, as well as community and legislative bodies who use that narrative to disproportionately incarcerate children of color, Black African Americans, at a disproportionate rate, and subject them to extreme sentences, including life without possibility of parole. And we're looking to do that through various mediums. One is through just giving directly impacted individuals the ability to tell them their stories, to reclaim their narrative. And that's in spoken word form, that's in through interview process, and also by imagery, and looking to explore ways to create that imagery to show that these children who were disappeared from society as children were not monsters, they were not predators, they were not godless murderous thugs without a conscience, but they were full human beings, and worthy of opportunity, care, and age-appropriate responsive accountability that maintain their dignity. So that's a primary piece that we're working on, as well as creating other social supports to deal with a hyper-marginalized community, and promoting racial and economic equity for disparately impacted former life sentence children as well.
The projects all three of you discussed are just so necessary in expanding, you know, our understanding of what's going on today. Reverend Michelle.
Yes, thank you. So I too am working on a lot of projects. My main intention right now is to try to make a COVID-proof society and program for the program I founded, Why Not Prosper. So that's formerly incarcerated women. And COVID exposed so many disparities with our women. So I want to make sure if COVID come back or anything else come back, that our women are not left sitting on the side of the road as they was when they emptied them jails up on State Road during COVID. So we created a hotline. I am currently working on a reentry recovery app for the city of Philadelphia that'll launch at probably by Thanksgiving, so that every resource and everybody that got a phone could download it. So I'm working on that, really trying to make it COVID proof, connect our women to each other, to the providers, to the services, so that they're not staying and left alone. That's my heartbeat right now. I'm also working on a pardon project where right now we have The Secretary of Pardons is very, one of us, a formerly incarcerated person. And so I'm trying to encourage everybody and their mom that's eligible right now to go apply for a pardon, right? Because we don't get a brother up there with a bow tie on too much, okay? And so we have been working with the Board of Pardons. We got them to revamp their application. We got them to streamline it, and we're pressing the governor to sign those pardons sitting on his desk. So those are two really major things. One other thing is COVID exposed to us like all the lack of not the lack of, but disparities. Like, for example, the courts closed down, and people were sitting in jail. They didn't know when they was going to court or any of that. And then the courts ain't had no plan when they was going to see them, when the judges was going to come back, and they started doing these virtual hearings, which I felt was unfair. So now I'm kind of advocating that a person with lived experience be at the table while y'all making these policies and while y'all are putting these practices in place, and let us be at the table when you do it, because they don't have no blueprint right now. COVID left us all with our pants down, for the lack of better words, okay? And so yeah, I'm just knocking on their door. Hello, can we come in here? And kicking in the door where we have to, basically, because then we ain't got to go back and ask you to change it if we sit there when you construct it. So those are some of the three things I'm working on, just trying to make a COVID-proof community for the city, and our women.
That's great.
So
Michelle, I'm gonna just try to show a couple of images for us. Can we see? Can you actually see the screen?
I can see a sliver of a PowerPoint slideshow, but it's not full screen.
Yeah, I wonder why. Okay, let's see if it comes through. Nope. Okay, I'm going to stop it again and see if I can find it. There, just while I'm doing that, if you want to, let's see if I can do it right here. So I'm going to try it again. If not, we'll. Okay, there, share.
Ah, yes.
Okay.
You got it.
Yeah, let's see. I'm not sure. Okay, so I'm going to go through these quickly. And these are just some close-ups and just the idea of where we were kind of experiencing dress in different ways. And here,
and I really love some of these close-up detail photographs, and so much so that they chose to take out these up-close photos and actually mount them in the exhibit, which is new and exciting for this particular project because we hadn't done that before. So I'm excited about it. And there's 7 of them, and they look so amazing. And
can you talk about the exhibit as we're flipping through?
Sure, absolutely. So it's on the top floor of the African American Museum. And what you will see when you come into the area is a gigantic triangle wall. And it opens up with these amazing up-close photography of the clothes or the hands. I love the way in which Professor Willis, you zoomed in on Reverend Michelle's prayer hands and Abdullah's dress, in his suit. Those photos, I mean, they actually speak to this whole idea that we've been talking about whole beings, whole people together. And so then around that wall, there's finishing of the rest of the other up close photos. And then the wall that is a little bit in the background behind you is called the process wall. And Michael Kohler, who is your assistant photographer, took some pictures of you taking pictures. And so we got to see some of the processes involved. And I thought it'd be important to intermix in the exhibit then some of the words, some of the phrases, key phrases and quotes that came out of the oral history interviews, which are then also on the wall in the exhibit. And then of course, Frederick Douglass and Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. These two people are sort of like the foundation which the project sits on. And so there's some quotes from them as well for people to read and learn about. And then, of course, there is the gigantic 8-foot tall, full V-flat, double prints of the carceral clothing and the everyday clothing with the triangle, the red triangle line on the wall. That is the major part of the exhibit. And it's just right across from it. And then on each photo on the right, you'll see a print off of a QR code that people will be able to scan and actually hear 3 to 4 minute excerpts from the oral history interviews. And then lastly, I think, again, I love exhibits that are multimedia, that they engage you in your physical, in your textual, in your ears, in your eyes, and in every kind of physical, in every kind of way. And so on the floor, as you walk through the exhibit, as you walk around these pictures, you'll see on the floor in red vinyl the words that say, "The weaponization of stigma upon the formerly incarcerated requires your participation." It is, again, this project is designed to get the observer to do a personal check and reflect upon the stigma that they produce and then weaponize against formerly incarcerated people. And so I always make sure I weave those words no matter where the exhibit is, so that you can't read the whole sentence in one stand, no, at one angle. You have to walk the exhibit. You got to walk around, look at these pictures, engage with these images to find the end of the sentence.
Thank you.
And
yeah,
absolutely.
We have about 8 minutes left, and there's a question from Paige Dukes.
Sure.
What can we do to replace the stock photos of prison bars, razor wire, handcuffs, and disembodied hands with photographs of real people, photographs that actually illustrate their experiences in their lives? So all of you, how do you feel about that question?
Yeah, I think that's a great question.
All of you could answer.
I think simply taking pictures of the people as opposed to the aspects or the components or the mechanics of prison. Take photos, use photos of the human being is what I would say off the top. But I think Abd'Allah has some thoughts about it as well.
Yeah, it's part of what we mean when we say when they see us, right? It's that they see us and not portions of our bodies or figments of someone's imagination of what it is to be incarcerated. And so in order to facilitate a real reckoning and undoing of that weaponization that requires intentionality, then I think that you do have to confront the truths of the indignities that are inherent in the way that we treat incarcerated persons. And that means that we have to witness it. We can't proportionalize it. We have to see the whole ugly truth for what it is, confront it within ourselves and within our society. So thank you certainly for raising that question. And I do believe that it should be done in a different way that is both dignified, but certainly that provides the full picture of our humanity or inhumanity, as it were, in prison.
John?
Mm-hmm.
What was the question again?
Let me see if I can pull it back up again.
Yeah, I was trying to pull it up.
What can we do to replace the stock photographs of prison bars, razor wire, handcuffs, and disembodied hands with photographs of real people, photographs that actually illustrate their experience and their lives?
Well, I think she answered the question herself. Pictures of real people, of really incarcerated people, of people that are incarcerated, as opposed to those stockpile pictures that they have. Get real people, real pictures, and replace those.
And we need to see it in public in different ways.
Mm-hmm.
Reverend Michelle?
Yes,
Absolutely. Reverend Michelle, go ahead.
Yeah, I would
just agree with my co-panelists already. That's already been spoken. Is that real life people go up instead of those instead of what's going on currently right now. So the live current portraits of successful people reintegrating and rebuilding and reclaiming should be the new stop post. Right?
It's really important because when you think about how popular culture and movies are creating these images as well, and so we see it in different ways, and so it's really important to rethink how that experience of the mugshot, like the reviewer for the show said that I made mugshots. And I'm like, no, they're not mugshots, they're portraits. And so how do we change that language?
Language,
So
absolutely.
when I read it, I was like, the reviewer needs to hear, if you're listening, to why see it as a mugshot when it's a portrait? Even portions of that. So that's something that is important, that how do we see that whole picture? How do we see the whole, how do we invite people to witness and contemplate and celebrate and appreciate how to look at an image? And I think that's why that important question is significant.
And I think it comes by reimagining this whole idea of like you took the lowest common denominator without asking further information. So it's you subjectively chose a phrase or a word without asking for that extra or reading the material that kind of supports it. I think when people say about this whole moment of this racial reckoning that we're in, I said I really feel strongly that people need to take the responsibility to educate themselves. And I would say the same thing here.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we know what this project is and we've shared that. So educate yourself. Educate. It's important.
Any questions, any last statements that I did not get an opportunity to ask?
The person asked what was the statement on the floor again, and I'll say it again really quick. It's on the floor. It says the weaponization of stigma upon the formerly incarcerated requires your participation. And the bottom line is that it's a choice. And that's why we offer you the point of triangulation. We offer you the triangle, the intimacy of the triangle, to step in and personally, quietly reflect upon the stigma that you're producing or you're participating in, subconsciously or consciously, implicitly or explicitly, and check that, right?
Do you know where the location of the murals will be?
Yes, 21st and JFK.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like right on this underpass that leads to the Whole Foods. And so we'll have both sides of the street because it has to be juxtaposed. I have to have both sides. So then the observer then is that third wall or that third part of the triangle. Okay,
great. Any other statements, any closing statements?
The mural should open up the last part of this month or the first part of December. Okay. So people look out for that. That'll come out on the Mural Arts website.
Okay, great. Abd'Allah?
Yeah, just quickly. So, and also to fight against the urge of exploitation and spectacle, right? Mm-hmm. Because as we engage, and certainly this project doesn't do that, but as we ask people to engage and see where they stand in this moment and in this weaponization of stereotypes, that we also interrogate how not only is there a weaponization of stereotypes, but there's also an exploitation of those stereotypes as well. For various purposes, and just looking at it in a way of how we restore dignity to people who have been stripped of and subjected to all manner of indignities because of incarceration. And so, yeah, just also fighting against the exploitation of that experience as well.
Right, and the whole point of the triangle is that this is not for this is for the individual in that personal space, because we know this biases, we know the implicit, explicit biases that we carry inside. And this is an opportunity, this whole thing is like, wow, there are beautiful people and images in this mural, in this exhibit. It's really to get the observer to kind of do some self-confrontation and some self-reflection for the betterment of us all. And because you can change some collateral consequences, you change some laws, but we need to change the way society operates, how the beliefs that we hold in the social quotidian experiences of everyday life. That's where societal change comes from, right? We have to make choices to look at people differently as individuals, and the law can do what the law can do, but it's our everyday choices that we need to check.
Yeah. John? Just any closing words?
Yes, I do. I have a few. I really, this project right here was really thoughtful and was a great project, because I personally would have never thought to do a project of from incarceration to where we at right now. And I really loved it, because it gives society an opportunity to see not only myself, but other formerly incarcerated people, because there's thousands of people in this city who could have been just as good on these murals or doing this project as I am. So I'm just thankful that people are going to get to see another side of incarceration, how a person can grow, how a person can change. And Brother Abd'Allah can attest to this. When you go to prison and you're young, you get an opportunity to transform yourself, depending on what road you take and how you view your incarceration. So it was a great opportunity for me. I wouldn't change anything, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Reverend Michelle.
Okay. So sorry about my light, and I feel like there's a huge glare, but I want to say that I'm very,
Just
very
shift
proud.
the side a bit. Just
My phone has started dying, so I had to come to the charger. So that's what shifted out of the beautiful light.
okay. That's it right there. Right. Okay.
All right.
Right
Okay.
there.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. So what I want to say is that for this project and for where I'm at personally, I feel so proud of the formerly incarcerated people. You know, we're putting a whole new stamp on incarceration, and this project is just giving us that whole light, especially for some of the, and I know they renamed themselves, but when I think of the juvenile lifers that came home, they are really, really doing the doggone thing, and they are really, really making an impact on the community. And I think this what this project really shows, if I'm explaining it correct. But I just want to say I'm proud. I want to say we as the formerly incarcerated person got to continue to do the work on ourselves, right? Because for me, prison was the worst and the best thing that ever happened, in my life, because it catapulted me to the woman that I am today. So I don't know if that made any sense, right? But what I'm saying is that I am so proud of us. They cannot just say that we're running amok or we're loose cannons, but we are really people of power now, and this project speaks to that.
Well, I'm empowered by this discussion today, and I'm really encouraged by all of this experience of beauty in this discussion and humanity. I mean, you've all introduced ways of how do we embrace and hold on to our humanity, and that's really central. Michelle, I'm going to say goodbye, and did you want to say anything else at this time before we close
No,
up?
outside of like, I'm truly honored to have worked with the 9 amazing participants in this project, and has truly been a gift to work with you, Professor Willis, to get your guidance and your mentorship. You've directed me on throughout the project, and I just thank you so much for that. And choosing these people was very intentional. These people reflect the fight of Philadelphians to make their world better, for the community in which they represent. And this is evidence. You're hearing it now. And the other the other 6 participants are just as involved in their community, working just as hard to lift up the lives of people who are directly impacted by the criminal legal system. And it's just an honor to work with them. And I thank you guys, all of you, for being here and bringing your voice and your talent and your gifts to the table.
Hope we'll get a chance to see each other, and please, the
Yeah.
exhibition online at AMP. If you go to their website, you'll see that. And
And we'll see you guys at the opening of the mural.
yes, continue to share the love. Take care. Bye-bye. And thank you, Mural Arts.